Hello. Dragons are my favorite mythical creature of all time. Nay, they are the mythical creature of all time. Think of any other category of mythical creature or monster, and I bet there's a dragon that is that as well. So I was genuinely surprised when I found out that one of the most imaginative creators I've ever heard about doesn't like them and thinks they are boring. Maybe dragons are to pointy hat what coffee is to me, where no matter what they add or change about it, I still don't like it. Unless they were only referring to the dragons of D&D, which is understandable. They're about as one note as any other species of monster. But dragons as a whole aren't that. They are perhaps the most diverse and versatile type of monster there has ever been. Red in her Trope Talk video on dragons explained it better than I ever could. Basically, dragon is less of a creature and more of a creature category. And even then, it is a category the same way fish is a category. Containing a very large number of highly diverse creatures that aren't even necessarily related to one another, but have certain common traits that set them apart from everything else. So in this video I want to highlight this diversity, by talking about some of the least conventional dragons I could find out there. This was originally going to be one video, but it turned out too long, so I'm splitting it into two parts. The first part is gonna focus on individual dragons, while the second part will focus on dragons as a species. The entries are not in any particular order, though I do try to save the most awesome ones for later on. But it's not a concrete ranking or anything. Dragons being such a broad category though, presents the problem of how do we define what does and doesn't count as one. I myself aren't sure what defining criteria to use. So for the purposes of this video, I'll consider something a dragon if it is called a dragon in universe. Alternatively, I'll explain why I think something is a dragon. The first such case is the Indominus Rex from Jurassic World, the good one. Now this was never outright called a dragon, but I'll argue it counts. First of all, consider its traits. It's a literal chimera of different dangerous animals, created for the sole purpose of being the ultimate dangerous animal. It has nigh indestructible scales. It is more intelligent than any other animal, maybe even as much as a human if the theories are correct. And it can even command other beasts into working for it. Basically, it is elevated above the animals of its setting, and more into the level of a force of nature. Or the opposite of nature rather, as it was created to be an aberration. The message was clear with this one. We're no longer dealing with animals, we're dealing with monsters. Oh, how I wish the story would have ended there, instead of taking that concept to ridiculous levels in the sequels. But I digress. On to the next one. Or should I say next ones? Because Subnautica gave us the Sea Dragon Leviathan, and the Sea Emperor Leviathan. And yes, I know these are technically members of their respective species, but that's not how they are presented in game. We only ever see one of each, with the rest presumed extinct. And they are treated with much greater reverence than the other Leviathans of the game. These two dragons may have a pretty unique design, but other than that they are as textbook example dragons as they get. The Sea Dragon Leviathan is basically the dragon at the end of a dungeon. It breathes fire, it guards a castle-like structure, it resides in a cave under a mountain, it attempts to eat the hero sometimes, and it is encountered near the final and most difficult part of the journey. That's an archetypical Western dragon in all but appearance. The Sea Emperor Leviathan is more Eastern dragon themed. It is a wise creature. As intelligent as a person, if not more so, and it helps restoring balance in the ocean ecosystem. At least I think those are Eastern dragon things. I only know the one from Spirited Away, and the one Sun Wukong got his weapons from. Anyway, let's move on. I wanted to include at least one dragon that is a person into this list. There were many candidates, but I think my favorite is King Bowser from the Super Mario franchise. He is one of the most iconic characters in all of fiction. Which is funny because he started off as some endgame boss that was only seen for a few seconds. And that's why I believe Bowser is my favorite person dragon. He didn't just become a person in the Watsonian way, but also in the Doylist way, as he basically underwent the same changes as the so-called monster races from D&D. I may or may not make a video where I explain this in detail, so I'll only briefly touch it here. Those two, when first created, were just enemies in a game. There was some lore about them, but it was all ultimately a background to the game level. As more and more additions to the franchise came out, however, the world became more and more fleshed out. What was once generic enemies you were supposed to defeat in masses became factions with their own interests and motivations. Bowser is still the bad guy, he still kidnaps the ruler of a neighboring kingdom, but we now also see the geopolitical implications of that. He still leads an army to battle, but we now see him having to manage all his minions. He even joins the heroes on occasion against a common enemy. I'm sure there's other dragons that have gone through a similar development over the years, but Bowser is the only one I could think of at the top of my head. Finally, we're going to the Monsterverse for another 2-for-1 deal. Godzilla is basically a modern-day version of Leviathan. Read Job 41 for details, as I don't want to just copy it. But yeah, Godzilla is as if someone tried to create Leviathan based on its description in the book of Job. But that's not all, as Godzilla also has powers related to nuclear fission. That way it represents the destructive wrath of nature, and that of humanity at the same time. But it's not all just destruction. Godzilla is also seen as Earth's protector. A being that attacks anything that seems to be hurting the planet. Whether it's monsters, aliens, or humans. So what could possibly challenge the Leviathan? How about Typhon? Or as they call it in the Monsterverse, King Ghidorah. I mean, look at that thing. It's a massive flying dragon with 2 tails, multiple serpent heads, a humanoid torso, and wings that can blow away buildings when they flap. That's freaking Typhon. And where Godzilla was seen as a destructive but nonetheless necessary part of nature, Ghidorah is seen as disaster on a cosmic level. There is no natural recovery from the damage Ghidorah causes. In fact, in one of the continuities, Ghidorah was what turned planet Venus from a habitable world into what it is today. If you know, you know. But yeah, that's it for part 1. I suggest that you also watch part 2, as you clearly like this stuff if you're still here. Goodbye for now.